I guess I'm gonna out her. Can't hear her. Yeah, she broke her wrist, and so she was in a car crash, unfortunately. And Tammy's actually my neighbor, and so I don't know why I just yelled at her. Oh, you want some help or anything? But she's got. Her husband is, in the sheriff's department, and her son's a paramedic, so she's in pretty good shape. She's pretty well taken care of. All right. Well, that's not. There we go. There we are. Jeff, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to be
my
here.
thoughts are with Tammy as well. That's a bummer.
It is a bummer because she's a hardworking person, and it's hard to see that go. Have her not be here. And so I was like, we got to get you on the show before the 20th. That was my goal, to get everyone on the show before the 20th. Jeff, you're running for Precinct 3 to replace Jonathan Letts. Tell us what we need to know about you. What's your background? All I know is I've heard. Here's what I've heard. You live in that little weird area where it's like kind of Comfort, but still Kerr County. We should just storm over there, annex Comfort out of Kendall County, and just make it our own.
We're so interconnected.
It's so
from
weird.
Comfort to Kerr County.
Right.
We're 13 miles in on Cypress Creek Road, and then 9 miles further to the east is Comfort. So I'm one of the East Kerr folks that live out there. We retired from the military and bought a small piece of property out there, a little ranch, and that's. It was a great first experience for a family to do.
I heard so this is just what I heard was that you're retired Marine,
right?
And you were at Pendleton was your last station or duty station. So tell us a little bit about that, your background in your career.
Yeah, a little bit about who I am and then how I got here. Probably it's an interesting story. So native Texan, born and raised in Dallas.
Okay.
Dad was an early NASA guy, and it's kind of cool. He actually worked with Tom Mosier at the same time.
Really?
He was one of my supporters. Hi, Tom, if you're listening.
If you're listening, yeah.
Yeah, I think he is. They didn't necessarily know each other. My dad worked in mission control for about 10 years, and then was Ross Perot's 75th employee.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is neat. And then stayed in Dallas, of course, after that. We were born and raised, and then I always wanted to be a Marine because the Marine Corps Drum and Bugle Corps used to come to the Texas State Fair.
Yeah.
My parents would always drag me out there, and I'm like, those guys are what I want to do.
Yeah.
My parents are like, no. If you don't shape up, I'm going to send you down to Harlingen, where the Marine Military Academy is. And I eventually did. Had a great experience growing up there in Dallas, and my parents were like, all right, you need to go to college. And I'm like, well, I want to be a Marine. I was serious about that when I was 6.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we're paying for college, kid, and honor your parents, honor your mother and father is something, that I respect. And I did for 4 years, right? And then I graduated, went in to the Marine Corps, became an infantry officer, and served for 30 years, hopping back and forth from East Coast to West Coast to overseas assignments. 5 combat deployments in that, and started second lieutenant, retired as a colonel, as an infantry officer. And in that, when we were moving once from East Coast to West Coast, we were just stopped at my sister's house in San Antonio, hung out with them, and we're in an old RV. Right, that's what we could afford. We've got this fun Winnebago, and I've got my 2 kids and my wife, and we're traveling on I-10.
Yeah,
go figure. Right here, we had a flat tire in July, 7 years ago, and that changed everything. It was, we're stuck. Where is this? We just left San Antonio. It's Kerrville. God, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then the people are so nice.
Helpful.
Unbelievable and helpful. And I'm like, all right, we got stuck here for 3 days waiting for 5 new tires. The guys at A&A took care of us. We stayed across at a Jellystone, which is a fun RV camp, right? And then we're like, all right, we need something to eat. Let's go get some steaks. So, we went across the street to Bernard's, and then they're like, we bought some steaks, and they're like, well, welcome. Where are y'all from? I'm like, well, we're just traveling across country, and and they're like, well, go ahead and pick out something on the wall. And this lady in the store is like, oh, and we're like, okay. So we all picked out something on the wall. We didn't know what she was. I'm like, oh, I'll pay more for some beef jerky.
Right.
I love beef jerky.
Yeah.
So we did, and she goes, that's on us. Just pay for the steaks. I'm like, well, that was super nice.
Yeah.
Then we go to Brown's Drive-In, not with the RV. That thing's not going to swing around Brown's Drive-In, right?
No, right.
So it was a wonderful experience. And they're like, well, where are you from and how are you here and why are you walking up to a drive-in window?
Yeah, right.
I'm like, well, we don't have a car. You know, it's an RV and it's parked way down there. We took a cab and nice cab driver and they're like, free milkshakes. I'm like, again?
Wow.
Look what's going on with this place. And then the third one is what sold us, Lewis. It was... we were at Neil Caldwell's Taxidermy, and there's a restaurant right next to it, and he's out on Highway 27 towards Ingram. And my friend's daughter, who's traveling with us, wanted to see America, right? In the back of an RV.
Right, you'll
help
see
us
it.
with our definitely. So she's in there, and she goes, I want some horns for the wall. I'm a hunter, right? I'm like, that's not really how it works, but I'm not going to tell the kid that. I'm like, let's just go in there and look. And Neil's like, he listens to her, and he goes, honey, pick anything you want on this wall. And I'm like, what?
Nice.
So she does. She walks up, picks off a nice pair of horns, brings it down, and Neil is like, okay, where do you live? Give me the address. It's in Washington, D.C. We just left from there, or Arlington. And then, we do all that, and he's like, I'm like, oh, here it comes. I get out my wallet. I'm like, I'm going to have to pay for something finally. And he's like, no, it's this much, right? He does it like, am I supposed to hit that? Or, what's going on there? And he's like, no, don't worry about it. I'll send it to her. And I'm like, and never once did I have to say that I'm a native Texan, that I'm a Marine, just like the Marines Neil has on his wall, like behind him.
But your haircut probably gave you away, though.
Maybe.
You still have it.
Yeah, I do. My wife loves it. I want to let it grow. And I will eventually, maybe one day. Anyway, so none of that mattered, and it was just out of the goodness of his heart that he did it. And I never had to say that her father was killed in combat, and I replaced him.
Oh, wow.
It was just Neil being a great guy and a great American, and the kind of people that represent our county. So that right there, and my wife and I looked at each other and like, we found it. We found the place we want to retire. And if we're not listening to God right now, then we're just flat out ain't listening. Right. So now it's about where do you want to live? And I had this dream of a ranch, right? And luckily through a great realtor in town, over 5 years, he searched for us.
Wow.
And found a great place on Cypress Creek. That's our story. That's how we got here. Yeah. My wife works at USA, drives east to San Antonio every day, and does a wonderful job for them. I'm proud of her.
Was she in the Marines too, or what's her military background?
Pretty close, my friend. Yeah. Pretty close. She was a civilian Marine, and she'll laugh when I say that.
Wow.
She was a GS employee for many years and had a career and did that, and actually wrote a Marine Corps order. Okay. I've never written a Marine Corps order. She did for volunteerism. So that's been a big thing in our family and with her, and she did that. And then throughout, and she's had a career that she's been able to do in between being a mom and a spouse, and has just done really well and raised. And I was gone a lot, frankly, on 5 combat deployments. Yeah. So
you're probably gone from all of 2002 to. 10.
Seriously. Yeah. 2002 to like 11.
Both in Iraq and Afghanistan? Or
2 in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan. I was a battalion commander. I was a regimental OPSO. I was a company commander, battalion XO. For all those military guys that are out there, that means I was a major and lieutenant colonel deployed for a significant period of time out of Hawaii and then out of the East Coast as well. So with that experience, it was wonderful. But, my kids have been to many schools and lived in many places, and now we found this place for them. They're both great kids. One graduated from Comfort, which was the closer school to us, and then he went off to Texas Tech, is doing well, and we're proud of him. And the other is a junior at Comfort, and should not be listening to us right now. She should be paying attention.
Although I think it's early release for a lot of kids today, so maybe they're just hanging out. So
it might be. Yeah.
And then your last duty station was at Pendleton. Right?
It was, I was a base commander, like I have to explain the role. It's a deputy commander of Marine Corps Installations West. Right. Our command with a 1-star, he had 5 different bases, 5 of the 7 on the East Coast, which is really cool. And he's like, the first one that was there was, I worked for him previously. I had 2 awesome general officers to work for. And they were the commanding general of Marine Corps Installations West, and it's like, Jeff, we need you to run the base. We want you to do this so I can think regionally and concentrate on the 5 bases. And in that, it was a wonderful experience and what kind of prepared me for this position. Because Camp Pendleton is like about the same size
Yeah.
as Kerr County, right? It has about the same size of residents. Our police force may be bigger. Okay.
Yeah.
We got like 222 uniformed and civilian police. We have fire department with 11 different departments. We had an operating budget of about $60 million. That may seem kind of familiar with what we do here for operations and maintenance, but we had a much larger capital and infrastructure budget, which I was the co-chair for.
Right.
For the 5 bases, right? Not just our base. So in that, good people have to make hard decisions. Not everyone gets a new chow hall, and not everyone gets a new building every year, and you got to plead your case, and we got to vote accordingly.
Now, are there still the we were talking about this the other day, the movie Heartbreak Ridge with Clint Eastwood? Are there still the Quonset huts there?
How did you know that? That's actually a really great question. Yeah, there are. And that's a wonderful place that we still kind of preserve up in the very north east of our base, right up on the Orange County line.
Yeah.
And that actually supports a lot of our reserve and some of our small schools. You can still go there today and hang out. Yeah. And it is such a beautiful place. Yeah. I know you know Southern California as well, but we spent 10 years there, and
I spent 3 glorious days on the base in December. It was probably my favorite part of my trip back. So my son's in the Navy.
Oh,
so
wow.
Yeah, he works on the LCACs. So we were there in the base housing, and let me tell you, that Marine. I told him a couple times.
What'd you think?
I said, you have a $2 million home.
I know.
Because he had a view of Del Mar Beach. The Marine Beach, out of every window of his house. They live in a cul-de-sac. It was wild. It was wild. And it compared to where they lived in Norfolk, because they were there for 5 years. Man, it was world class. And I was fascinated too. I told this to Jeff Harris. I said, I find it fascinating that they're opening some of that housing up to retirees and and to DoD people as well, and veterans. And I was like, man, you're not going to get a better deal in San Diego County than that base. So, anyway.
With the excess capacity they have, I'm very aware of the public-private venture and Lincoln Military Housing that runs that, and hi Jill Dorflinger if you're listening out there. But some of those decisions are made where we have excess capacity, and 17 miles of shoreline. I mean, it's a $6 billion plant value on Camp Pendleton, and that's not including the real estate, my friend.
No, I mean,
think about 127,000 acres that's still preserved as a ranch with that mentality. Yep. It's incredible. But I remember helping out the LCAC guys with getting a new ramp, and that's one of the things we voted on for infrastructure. And if we do that kind of asphalt work, somebody else is going to have to wait. But those are things and decisions that we make there, and I certainly value my time and the experiences that I had being a part of that. And I'm going to hope to bring a lot of that experience here to Kerr County as commissioner.
By the way, if you've ever been there, folks, you don't know that part of California is right on Interstate 5, or the 5 as we call it, and it has the worst traffic. I could not. It's been so long since I've been, I've never stayed at the base, so this was a new experience for me, and that whole southbound side of 5 is just a bottleneck until you get to Vista Way or Oceanside, where 78 goes east. Like, oh my, why is there traffic? What is this? Anyway, it was enlightening. So you retire, and then you decide you want to get into politics. And my question on that is, are you nuts or are you just crazy? I mean.
Great question. Yeah, I was asked. Anthony Bonert, who's like if you will, the mayor of Comfort. We're not incorporated, but everybody knows Anthony. He's our mailman. He's actually an elected official too with the telephone company. Wonderful guy, and he's one of our old school families that are out there. And he came to me and goes, Jeff, I want you to run. You're the right guy. And I'm like, run? What did I do? Am I in trouble? I've only been here 2 years. No, you need to run for county commissioner and do this for us, because we have all of our local rancher guys out here, and we need representation, and we believe with your experience, you're the right kind of person. I sat on it for a while, Lewis.
Yeah.
I mean, I entered my name late. Talked to my wife. I talked to other commissioners, both in Kendall and Kerr. What do you do? How was it done? Why should I do this? And then we decided, we thought about it, we prayed about it, and then my wife and I made that hard decision, And I felt, I'm like, oh wow, what am I getting into? And then I just saw a video, which is on my Facebook page, Holt for Kerr 3, from 3 retired general officers: General Mattis, General Dunford and General Kelly. Rick Atkinson was interviewing him like you're doing here. It was in kind of a forum. Right. And in it, at minute 35 and 10 seconds, General Mattis, who I worked for as a lieutenant, right? He was a colonel, great guy, by the way. He says, if you are ever asked to run for local politics, and the subject of this video was about military's role in the democracy. So it's like he was speaking to me. If you're a retired colonel, general officer, and you're asked to run, you need to do that. You need to respond. And I felt like he was my calling. This is my due duty. This is my new obligation to do that. And I shouldn't be scared because I'm not a politician.
Right.
I have experience to offer, and maybe some of the local folks need that. So at that point, I felt kind of vindicated by that. And now it's about meeting everyone in Kerr County, learning the issues that are going on. And there are some really complex issues. Like water here is way more complex, believe it or not, than water at Camp Pendleton. We were energy poor but water rich at Camp Pendleton, which is a little bit different than the rest of the area in Southern California dealing with drought. But we had very good water resources, but here it's like the complete opposite, right? And so we have our own challenges to understand, especially when it comes to state legislation and federal. But I'm used to dealing with federal and state and local issues, especially when you had 5 bases at different places that, had their own state issues and local issues and how they integrated, and they would come to us for a lot of help and resource and advice, and we would try to give that. But I had my own base, right, to be concerned about as well. And some of that was dealt with local politics.
The ranchers that went to you and said, what were their concerns? Was it water? Was it an encroachment of development? What was their concerns?
Well, they have a Tuesday night safety club. You know who you are, gentlemen. On Mike Sauer's ranch. And it's great to sit down with that group. They're just salt of the earth, good people, and they have been here for a long time. Water is an issue. They were concerned about the key capture energy proposal that was talked about recently at the Comfort Middle School. But really, my 3 R's that I have in the campaign developed from that. One is responsive government. If they have a complaint, they want to be heard. They want folks to come out. They want to look at it and see if we can help and resolve that issue or not. But water is scaring us. Yeah. Our creek that I live on, Cypress Creek, had been dry for 8 months. Yeah. The longest period in known history with those guys that it has been dry. That's a major issue for our surface water. And I know that I represent the TCEQ Water Master South Texas Cypress Creek. I'm on that little advisory board, right? Many others too that are different areas. But it's when they talk about opportunities for water capture, we need to start paying attention on that. To try to keep surface water. Yeah. And, there are some local things where they try to get grants to keep some of the surface water. There are different issues that they deal with groundwater and things like that. And you have to all pay attention to it. And they're trying to keep their ranches whole. But when property taxes jack up, right, over a year, and these guys are dealing with big properties, and they only get so much of an agricultural exemption, and they got to have, excess jobs to pay the bills, or hunters that are, come and lease the property. Right. And if they don't plan for it and don't know a big hike is coming, how do they pay an extra $20,000, $30,000 for those property taxes, right? So they need to kind of be predictable and know when the tax rates are coming and going to increase, because they have to figure out new ways to pay it. And that's hard. They don't want to sell. These ranchers do not want to sell an acre. Yeah. Right. Right. They don't hold on to it. Right. They do, especially the older folks. Now, when they hand it off to their sons or daughters or whatever, sometimes decisions are made. Yeah. Right. When I look at Comfort and Center Point, the corridor there, I think of, the trap of Southern California. There, I think of the legislature sort of like, look, if they want to build something, you have to let them do it. There's no planning. They're going to change the platting process. There's people who have spoken to the commissioner's court, like, you can't tell me how to do on my land. I can divide it any way I want. And the county's kind of trying to hold the line. Basically the only way they can do is say, okay, Headwater says this, but the reality of it is that, and you've probably been at Pendleton enough to know that, I remember 35 years ago, that most Oceanside didn't exist. All those communities next to, on the
on the south side of Pendleton didn't exist 15, 20 years ago. And
they were rough, actually, the folks that lived in
Oceanside was
20
rough.
years ago.
Oceanside was awful.
Oh, man. It's much better now.
I knew Marines that I worked with that had been at Pendleton, and they were like, yeah, don't go to Oceanside. But it's changed dramatically.
Yeah, it has. Money has been brought in.
Money's been brought in. But the development issues, right, where people don't realize, you look at California's political situation, they don't realize, but they had a hands-off approach a lot of times on development and just went in a hurry. And that's my concern about Comfort and Center Point. It's like, especially Comfort, they have that freeway infrastructure. They're building some stuff around it now. That's a place that can get big in a hurry.
I know.
And
it's not incorporated. It's Kindle.
It's not incorporated. And then Center Point has so much flat buildable land, but the water issues are significant still. But how do you manage it? How do you address that issue?
Well, first of all, you got to look to who's doing it right out there. And there's some aggregate and concrete folks that are out there. And one of the first folks that I met that my brother-in-law introduced me to, and he's a construction guy, sold his construction company in San Antonio, great guy, but RA Construction, I'll call him out by name, and they're doing it well. I visited with him and his group out there, and they have a permitted well to do aggregate work, and they sell aggregate of different sizes and soils and things like that. But he had to invent his own water storage and recapture, because when you go through water and you pull it and you're cleaning the rock, right, that water residue, you don't want to dump it back in. So I don't like that answer, but some folks could do that, right?
And historically, you can kind of go up and down those parts of the Guadalupe River, and you can see where that's happened.
I know, all the effluents and particles that get reintroduced at a higher volume, which is not good for that riparian environment. So anyway, he designed his own water lake out there, and he dumps it back in there, and then he recaptures that water. It'll settle down into the earth, and then he uses that water again. He uses only 1 million of the 10 million gallon permit.
Wow.
So I wish all folks could learn from that.
Yeah.
But he's such a smart guy. He's a great example, the owner, Mr. Avalos, and he graduated from Comfort, went off to New York, went to Cornell University from Comfort High School, right? Got his education, worked on Wall Street.
Smith, he's running for the 53rd. That's the same deal.
No, I heard maybe they went to school together, but
both Cornell.
Yeah, he brought all that knowledge and money back, and he's investing locally. I mean, what a great example. He's hired a whole bunch of his friends out there, and they're doing great work, and and he's making a difference, but he's doing it the right way. And he's being environmentally conscious, and he's hiring folks, and I appreciate that. There are other examples of other different aggregates and concrete folks that are different, and I've tried to visit a lot of them, and I've actually bought stuff from a lot of those folks that are out there. And don't get me wrong, I mean, if you have a caliche driveway, where do you think that caliche came from?
Right.
If you got concrete that's being poured, folks, you need to know who's making it and why, and that takes water and it takes some development, but there's kind of a balance of what we can afford.
Yeah.
And sometimes the growth that we've had with some of the folks in the concrete or aggregate business has been difficult, and folks are coming from all over other counties. When I spoke to Kelly Hoffer, she's trying to get in line to get aggregate for her own roads to do chip seal, and she's getting beat out by TxDOT and other counties that are coming to our aggregate folks, and that could be a little frustrating, right? But it's an industry that has kind of developed over there that we can only absorb so much, because some of those take great water requirements, right?
Right. When I look at Texas, and I get really excited about the entrepreneurial spirit that's here and the optimism that's here financially, but I feel like there are traps that we're not really grasping, especially in the political environment here. One is property taxes. You don't, like, hey, we don't have an income tax. I was just talking to a friend of mine about this the other day. He's like, there's no income tax. Yeah, but your property taxes are crazy. And two is that we're not really current on wages a lot of times, which we see here in Kerr County. Yeah. And three, the potential for uncontrolled development. So you're expressing the idea of the Texas miracle economically, but yet you're one of the things we see here, and we've seen it over and over again, is the minute a development comes in there, we all turn into Southern California liberals. I don't want that in my backyard. Don't put that there. It's a very interesting, I did a thing one time a couple of years ago where I took comments from anti-development groups and I mixed them in with comments from Kerr County. All of them were from Santa Barbara was my examples, and the language is identical. We don't want that here. We want something that's different. We've seen that in Center Point. We've seen that, in the Eagle Ridge Road project, which the county.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the county.
That's cost us a lot of money in legal fees.
But the county held the line. They said we don't want to do that because these residents are opposed to it. Of course, the residents were smart and they lawyered up immediately. Mm-hmm. How do you fight? How do you address those issues? Because the property tax issue is going to be a big one in the next budget year. If you're elected in 2025, it's going to be even bigger because the people don't realize the county is losing $10 million in ARPA funding, which is basically covered a lot of ground, a lot of areas, a lot of expenses that they didn't have previously. And, the wage stuff, because Kelly Hoffer is a good example of this. She's having trouble keeping, commercial drivers because
very good.
The competition is huge for that, I know. So,
and we did try to boost their pay a little bit, especially the CDL drivers.
How do you address those issues? Because those are going to be. I mean, I watched the Commissioner's Court last year sit on its hands for the most part, and not figure out. They couldn't figure out what to do with the budget.
That's because I think we need a master plan.
So how do you do that? What does the master plan look like then for you?
Yeah, that's one of my goals is to come in and develop a master plan.
Mm-hmm.
First, got to have a vision, right? You got to have a mission, and then you got to set strategic objectives. And with that, you have to have lines of operation for each of those objectives. And we kind of already have it. They talk about it, but yet the city has their own 2050 plan, but yet the county doesn't. I don't understand how we operate that way because we have developmental goals that have to be announced. Like, what is it? 1% growth? Is that what we're trying to target? Or is it 3% like we've been experiencing since COVID, right?
Right.
And we have to understand where our population growth is going to be. We have a finite amount of land. We have a finite amount of water resource. And if we don't have a plan that says that how we're going to address each of that, it's going to collide. And we have to have a plan that does that, actually raises revenue and supports our county government. And then we think long term. Like if we don't have enough water, we need programs that can do that. And if it's utilizing state or better relationships with the city, right, and usage and things like that, we need to come together as better with working groups with city, state, and federal to understand the water issue and to actually look how we can do that better. And things I'm talking about are like cedar.
Right.
We've got to wage war against cedar.
Yeah.
It is a legitimate concern to our natural native hub trees that we have out there, and they just don't stop growing.
And it's a spectacular fire hazard too. Oh my God,
man! I know. You got to cut it down, and then you got to burn it, right? You got to burn it safely because if you don't, it leaches into the soil with all that stuff, and then it kind of it causes erosion. And I've seen it on my own place, right, where I bought it, and I'm like, why is it all the cedar piles, and why hasn't it been burnt? Why is it all? Well, there's no grass growing around it. Well, it's because it leached in, and all of us that live out on property, whether it's in the city or town, need to go to battle against cedar because it's not helping, and it's taking a lot of the water from our natural stuff. So that's a big deal for me. Water capture, like I've seen it so many other states that I've lived in, not growing fast enough here individually, and then as a county or a citywide. And I commend Jonathan Letts. He started talking hard about water capture years ago and is trying to do this at a county level. We need to continue that, those resources, and do what we can to keep the surface water as much as we can so we're not having to pull as much out of the aquifer and understand where we're at with aquifer. So water is a big deal. I'm going to talk about property taxes for a minute, right? And about where our tax dollars come from. You got to understand that. Just look at the budget. It's online. You can see $30 million of our revenue comes from grants. And fees, you get a parking ticket, you get a speeding ticket, you got court fees. All those fees adds up. That's $30 million of our revenue. $20 million is ad valorem, comes from our property taxes. Right. So it's still a large contributing amount. And then $6 million is sales tax. So I don't know how much you can really account from tourism of that, but a certain portion.
It helps,
Yeah, and where do we grow? Do we want to be a Bernie? Do we want to be a Fredericksburg? Do we want to be our own thing, which is Kerrville, which is, it is a large retirement community, and I understand that. But we also have, it's been difficult for businesses to move in and then have places for people to live. And I've walked all over the city in my campaign pretty much because Precinct 3 is really all north of the river.
Yeah.
And I've got to understand the neighborhoods with a lot of our awesome precinct chairs and walking and seeing people and meeting that. And there are opportunity. There's one guy who moved in. He's an architect, and he moved into Southeast, and he had this 100-year-old home, and he fixed it up, and it looks beautiful. You know who you are out there. His son's is going to be a Marine as well. So we had a great conversation in his home, but it's a great example of gentrification. Not everyone can afford that, right? To say, I'm going to dump $100,000 into this new home.
Yeah.
I'm certainly grateful when people do that because it starts off things. When Habitat for Humanity, can redo a few of the homes that are already there. Maybe it starts a wave. If we could promote more of that, and I hope great folks in the city can do that. That's their business, right?
Right.
But it's also the same place we go through. Instead of having to cut apart the country, right? If we can start that gentrification and keep that up in Kerrville, I'd be very appreciative, right? Because the water doesn't support it out east, and that is a big deal for us. And then,
what point? Going back to that again, at what point is there? You got all these straws sucking out of the aquifer, on wells. Does there need to be some sort of larger municipal water system where they're not pulling out? It's more metered. How do you solve that issue?
I'm gonna go look at a neighborhood actually where it's kind of an example where that failed. And I spoke to a gentleman last night who was pretty heated, right before the debate. He grabbed me for about 30 minutes, and he's like, "Yeah, I have a public water system," and it was built a small community of 20 or so lots that was going to be 5 acres apiece, and then we had one well and that provided the water. He considered that a public water system, one well for the 20 lots of 5 acres. But then some of the folks have been coming there and then making these little RV lots, so now it's split down between a 5 acre and then have like 10 RVs on it, and then the population has grown. Now they get 1 gallon per minute out of that well, and they consider that a public well. And all these guys have been trying to figure out a way to expand their property according to Headwaters, which says a 10-acre lot is what you have, and then you can have your own well, and then you have to replat. Well, that's not cheap. This guy had to basically get land willed to him to be 10-acre lot, and then get a $3,000 replat done, so he could dig his own well at 700 feet. What do you think that costs?
Oh my God,
$50,000. Right, and he did it himself. So that's a considerable expense for people that are tight on their budget that have to do it out there. But that's what it takes if a public water system necessarily doesn't work right.
Well, a lot of those wells are not as deep as 700 feet either. They're going to they're skimming the top of it and not once the aquifer draws down, they're out of luck.
Right, and they want to hit the Trinity. I understand that's a little bit better water source than the Edwards. But mine's not. Mine is 127 feet, but I live down low, like right on the creek. And for those that are at different hill elevation, like my sister-in-law who lives out in Center Point, right out on Elm Pass 2, they're dealing with almost that exact same situation on a small plot of land. And where some of the guys entertain whoever in the RVs that they come in, and I don't think it's just here for the Eclipse, my friend. I think it's a little bit different business strategy. It makes it really difficult for one well to pull for the community. So extending the public water system that are here, I'm not sure is the answer, but responsible. Or
creating maybe even a group that can provide that. Hey, we can drill deeper, and get that's where.
I've heard talk about that.
I mean, Kerrville has run into that issue already, where they have the geologists who are, by the way, geologists are all evil, but the geologists have said, like, if you go deep, you're going to hit, the Ellenberger, and
a lot of talk,
and they believe it very firmly, and they're all oil and gas guys, so I believe them.
Yeah.
But it also requires a deeper what, which is very expensive.
Oh yeah.
And Kerrville had a situation where casings failed and pumps failed, and suddenly it's $100,000, if not more, in repairs to get these wells working. So it's a very complex issue. It's very expensive, And we also have the terrain here, which isn't always friendly for moving water around. So I don't know what there's a simple.
A lot of rocks,
a lot of elevation changes, a lot of stuff. Did you watch the Commissioner's Court for like a period of time when you got here to see maybe the level of dysfunction that was on the Commissioner's Court for the last year?
Yeah, it's on YouTube, but I've actually since this I've showed up in person and seeing some of the Commissioner's Court stuff going on, and You know, I mean, I get it. You know, I run on a different kind of platform. I'm a guy that, you know, has always been able to kind of talk to a lot of different groups of people.
Yeah.
And not get intimidated by that, and kind of enjoying different perspectives and different views.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be comfortable that if you're going to be a leader, not a politician, but just a flat out leader, right? So, you know, back to the water issue, you know, there is an interesting study that I read in a 2018 study that came out in 2020 by HDR Engineering, and I talked about it on some of my websites, and they do talk about that, the Ellenberger field that has to be hit, and that is a big time project, and they believe that's the only way to meet the rising demand for water and overpopulation. But it's also, they do talk about Cedar, they talk about water capture, and they're talking about, you know, making sure you're in good coordination between your city and your county when we do water restrictions, right? And to understand that. And we need to be able to work better with the city, and the city needs to be able to work better with us at the county. There's been some level of dysfunction that, you know, is a little disheartening for us as constituents, right? Because we expect them to be able to talk and work out some of the issues. And, you know, I've seen some level of dysfunction, and I want to try to bring order and a master plan.
Right. But you don't have a mustache, though. That's going to be a problem. We might have to rethink the facial hair requirement.
Brother, it looks terrible. That's my wife who's listening. I've tried to grow it long in a mustache. She goes, nah, it's just not you.
It doesn't really work in the Marines.
No, yeah. Well, every November, you know, we try for a little bit, but I always lose that contest.
Right. You got an endorsement, which Tom Jones kind of pushed back against to me when I brought it up to him, about from We the People, Liberty in Action, which is hard line to say the least. Did you accept that endorsement, or how do you view that piece of it?
You know, I'm proud to have endorsements by a lot of people. You know, I'm not a member of that group, but I certainly go to a lot of the events. Like, I'll go to every event, every debate that people ask from whatever side of our party. And I understand it's a little fractured, and it's kind of disappointing, honestly, for me coming into this as a new guy.
A little fractured. It's hugely fractured at this point.
Yeah, I know. But, you know, you need true folks that can unite and listen to all the sides and come together for the good of the people on certain things. And that's what I intend to do, you know.
How do you do that as a, you know, I mean, I listen to Republicans all the time, and I'm like, I don't know how they're going to repair some of this damage that's been done. You know,
it's hard to bring people together, Lewis, but that's the answer that you're looking for. You got to get people to sit down at the same table to work through issues, and sometimes that's by voting new people into offices, and that's what's going to happen here in March and then in May, right? And we'll see where all the chips fall, and where the people really want leadership in there that is well-grounded and true to themselves and aren't going to change. And it's been somewhat difficult, but I'm proud of the endorsements that I've got from current and sitting commissioners as well. And the education they provide.
Right. The popular story that we've heard is that Rich Pace has asked you to run. And it sounds like Tom Mosier was the one that really asked you to run, Tom we've had in there as well.
Neither of them asked me to run. Okay. Anthony Bonert asked me to run.
That was the guy that asked you to run.
Yeah, Anthony, the mayor, if you're the pseudo mayor out there.
Comfort.
And then, you know, after talking to a lot of the folks that are out there, and I'm like, wow, okay, I have a lot of education I need. What does a commissioner do exactly? So I'm in a VFW group out there in Comfort, and one of them is a former commissioner.
Right. And
so I talked to him, and I started, and then I talked to other former commissioners and current commissioners, and actually sat down almost with I sat down with every person who'd sit with me in the county government. What do you do?
Yeah.
What's your budget like? You know, and that is a tremendous experience. They're all willing to sit down and talk, and I learned so much through that provide me the education that I need to answer hard questions.
Right. I can't imagine, and I've said this before, and I'm blunt about it. In my 30-some years of journalism, I've never seen a more disastrous first year than Rich Pace has inflicted on Kerr County. If I was to rank the worst politician in town, it's him. He's cost the county hundreds of thousands of dollars in unnecessary expenses. The election integrity issue consumed a big chunk of last year. How do you rectify that? You had county employees who were furious with him for, you know, his antics basically around election denial. It's still something that's creeping up, and you know there's a push to continue to do hand counting. Where do you sit in that area?
Well, I can tell you right now that, you know, Rich Pace has provided me information that I find very valuable, like over the Prop A, B, and C issues. He did exactly what I would do, which would walk the ground and actually look at the buildings from an engineering perspective. I'm not an engineer like Rich is. I don't have that level of experience, but trust me, whenever there's a bad barracks or a bad chow hall, I'm going to walk out there with the people and the engineers and get their information.
Right.
And that he did that and was able to be very well informed on that, on these issues and the propositions. And maybe we can reset some of that and figure out what we can do for the indoor agricultural barn in the future.
Right.
And then the courthouse and security and storage. I value what he's done for that. I understand he's got his own agendas that he wants to do with the ballot and the counting and all that. But we're stuck with an election which is Republican and Democrat. I get it. I'm gonna be voting in it just like you are.
Right.
And I'd love to have your vote.
Thank you.
By the way. So in that regard, what I've offered everyone is do a paper ballot, right?
Yeah.
Don't do the electronic one in case it could be checked. It's a lot easier to be audited when you do a paper ballot. Fill it out, send it in, and I did that last November and watch it go through the little machine and print out, and then okay, that's great, and then people can, I love the fact that we can do that. Now elections have done paper ballot or paper counting only for a long time, and it didn't take that long. It was amazing. We'd actually get the results that night.
Right.
So it is possible. I know that. And Fredericksburg is looking at it. And,
But they want to do full on. Fredericksburg's going to do full on hand counting, or Glen's going to do on full on hand counting. There's no machines at all. It's all hand counting.
Let's see how it goes.
I think it's going to be a disaster. But
Let's see.
It's been proven already. It's been messy. You look at it right now when they had this runoff this last time. They had a hard time getting the numbers right. It's a really. There's a reason why we do things a certain way, because they were bad to begin with. Like hand counting. Like, oh God, how do we count all these ballots? I think we've proven. In your military experience, what is the oldest thing that you relied on that was traditional in the military, as far as like culture? Or process.
Our values.
How about process? What would be the oldest thing you still do in the Marines? It's
promotion
a process.
board. Easy. No, seriously.
Yeah.
And we modeled our, believe it or not, our capital infrastructure board after a promotion board, because it's the oldest standing thing that we have to do, and it's very strict on what you can bring in about a person. And I sat on promotion boards, and it's a wonderful thing when you're able to look at somebody's life and say, here's the value they provide. They're a 1 or a 6. A 6 is like a water walker, like Nicole Mann, who was up in the space station recently.
Yeah.
You would not believe how good her record is. I can't really talk about some of the stuff in her record, but I briefed it, and I'm like, this lady is the best Marine I've ever met. But in order to actually brief that, the promotion board, you look at the entirety of the career, everyone briefs on it. You can only bring in positive information, not negative, and then everyone has their own vote. It's a 21-person vote, and then there's a president of it. We formed a capital improvement infrastructure board on the same way, and it really revolutionized what we were doing, because we were voting on very hard projects.
Right.
Every project was a person, right? And every project got a vote 1 to 6, and we got very disciplined about it.
Mayor Eichner, how are you? Judy Eichner, Mayor of Kerrville. Good to see you.
So that's an example of some of the discipline I want to bring into to voting on some of our projects.
Right. Do you see again, going back to some of the things that the county's been dealing with? I would argue that my belief is that one on the animal shelter, which Rich Pace was really opposed to. One, because of the political action of Kerrville Pets Alive, rallying the troops to get that vote passed, and it did pass, and they're going to build that now. But the other two were a rebuke of the Commissioner's Court, in my opinion. The Commissioner's Court had done so many things that they were like, we don't believe you. We don't believe, even though they had a CIP, they had a capital improvement project of some really impressive individuals in our community, and they still couldn't convince it. And I think Rich helped torpedo some of that. That leaves, though, a serious issue at the courthouse. Like, how do you pay for those things that they need to be? You go into that courthouse, and I was talking about before. It's like whatever historic stuff that was left in that courthouse is gone now because it's been chopped up and cut up into so many pieces. You know, maybe the staircases are kind of historic.
It's still got some flavor. Come on,
it's got a little bit, a touch of it.
Yeah,
but that's about it.
I like history too, but you know, it's always a mix and a balance.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you have cool old wood, old barn wood inside here. Same thing I did in my parents' house, right? You know, you try to keep some of that history alive where it's appropriate, but then there's some modern things that have to come in, and some of that can be done in the courthouse with security on the main level, right? But we do have a lot of constables that work in there, and we do have a sheriff that's in there all the time. And for security itself, it can take some money. And I think what Rich did and what he counter-proposed on that seems to be exactly what I would do, which was, hey, look, we have a lot of storage options all throughout this whole county that are very good, and we actually get one great value in an Ingram for $1 a year, right?
Yeah.
Let's work on that and keep a lot of the hard copies where needed, but we probably have some housekeeping to do, my friend, you know, and a lot of the different documents, and that's not just on all the county clerk, by the way. Every office needs to make sure we do that and to have that storage and then get things into digital. And there's always drama with digital and cyber. I get it. I've actually worked in that arena in the joint staff.
Right.
So I really do understand how that can be an issue, and that was a major issue out at Comfort with key capture security as well as cybersecurity.
Key capture, you talked about that on Monday, and I kind of watched it, and I got distracted by something else, so I haven't finished viewing all of it.
It's a big deal.
Is it? It's a battery project. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, I went to it and I represented our Cypress Creek gang. You know, the old ranchers. And I'm like, hey, there's a thing that's going on. I took Calvin, who's about kind of my life coach for ranching, by the way, out there, and we went together and listened to it. And there were like 400 residents, mostly angry, all gathered. But the whole court was there from Kendall. It was a great example of Kendall County, you know, unity as a court, providing a public medium. This project came before them, or they tabled it. We're not going to vote on a tax abatement that you're asking for, or a plat, or rezoning, or TERS. We're going to make you stand in front of the people and explain what you're trying to do. So you have to understand what it is. It wasn't a disposal site for a battery. It was actually a battery backup, like an UPS. I don't know if you may have an UPS here right now. Yeah. Right? It's like a large-scale uninterrupted power supply off the ERCOT LCRA substation. Now, it does impact Kerr County residents. It doesn't matter that it's in Kendall. That is our main substation. 138 kV lines run into it, and 69 kV lines run out to it, and they run out to Kerrville, to the 4 different Kerrville substations.
It's just taking that stuff and putting it into batteries, basically, right? And what was the objection to it? Was it because of the battery technology, which usually is like molten salt or some crazy thing?
No, it's lithium ion, but you know, it's all bought in China. It's a South Korean company that's backing them. It's green bonds, so it's cheap financing. And then besides that, they get an investment tax credit. They get a 30% discount to buy any new product. I know it's lithium-ion batteries that are small, and you put them in trays, and it brings a lot of power backup, 10 megawatts of power backup. And then their idea is to buy low power on low bulk rate and then sell high at peak. That's their business model for 20 years. They're not buying land. They're not being given land. They leased 8 acres of land to do a 4-acre thing. But here was the issues. And those folks did not expect engineers to stand up and doctors to stand up from Comfort. But that's who we have, a lot of very smart retirees that are out there. And they said, okay, here's the issue. You're a mile from the town, you're a mile from our high school, and you're a mile from the Guadalupe River, right, where this substation is. And if something went wrong with the battery fire, like I see in lithium cars, and they were saying, no, it's different technology. Okay. Not sure that it is, but if something went wrong, how would our residents from Flat Rock Ranch get out? It's a one-way, and we don't have another northern exit. If there was an issue, that's an issue. And if there was a fire, where do the winds blow? They blow right to the high school. They blow right to town. And if you came in there and tried to douse it with water, well, what's that going to do to lithium? It's going to run off your automatic fire suppression system. Guess what that's made of? They didn't talk about that very much. I was going to hit them up. But that's made out of firefighting foam, PFOS, PFOA. You douse water on it, what happens to that? If it doesn't have a catchment like a hanger does, it'll run downhill. Where's it running to to Guadalupe. So that was an issue they couldn't answer, and they didn't have, that wasn't part of their engineering design. They didn't have anyone on site to cut the power. They're like, oh, we're all remote, and we've been doing this throughout all Texas, you know? And that's an issue that our people just didn't buy for safety. And then cybersecurity, they're like, well, how are you protecting that? Because if you have all this power here and it's surged through the substation, you could wreck all those transformers and all the ones downline, which is Kerrville, right? Yeah. And you have to assure us that you have good cyber protection. Like, oh, there's not a threat. Oh, really? Because the very next day, an article came out in BBC about China has been in our electrical grid and ready to crash it if needed.
And so the Russians too, probably. Yeah, you know, both of them.
Some of that I can't speak about.
Yeah.
But,
so they probably have. I mean, it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
Everything, as we said before, there is a certain. I mean, I always love the story in Stuxnet. You know, where
Natanz.
Yeah, that you know they sent it to Bush and he couldn't grasp it. You know, and George W. and they basically took a.
I know a lot about Natanz, unfortunately, and Stuxnet.
The Stuxnet, you know, they took basically a blender in and hacked the blender in front of him, and then he got it. He was like, "Oh, okay, centrifuge."
Yeah, and then that was an interesting thing, and it got loose, and it's getting past the Siemens controllers, and you know, you look at most of these places, and you ask. Is that a Honeywell or a Siemens controller, and how is that backed? And you know, if somebody brought in a computer in there, like what happened in Natanz,
right,
and that fiber spread, what would happen, and could they get past it, and could they manipulate it? That's what you have to have placement and access in order to do that in the cyber game. A lot of this stuff I learned in the Joint Staff J39 when I did this for a living. So, you know, in that particular instance, we saw how susceptible some of our infrastructure. And Natanz, that enrichment plant in Iran, was one example of infrastructure that could be hacked and was. I'm not going to say who did it, my friend. Yeah. But
I mean, I think it's pretty clear. But I mean, at the end of the day, it was like it was so baffling to the Iranians. They were like, "The heck."
One undisciplined dude brought a laptop in.
You guys are all idiots. We're going to have you shot now.
Yeah, Lord knows what happened with that. But, you know, it did delay some of their enrichment program for a while, and that was maybe considered successful for a little bit. And we have to be very alert to that in our own infrastructure systems that are critical. And if you had a large storage of battery power on one side and then it surged through, that becomes the issue. You have to have good assurances they can't get past those controllers, which, you know, moderate all the flow of electricity from one side to the other. Are you sure we're there?
Are you worried? You know, going back to one thing I was thinking about now. You know, we talked about the division in the Republican Party, and full disclosure, one side of the group paid for advertising in the lead. But just to advertise their slate of people. But how do you reach out? I mean, you're kind of caught in the middle.
Well.
I mean, how do you deal with?
I get you.
The precincts are at war with each other, you know, or the two sides are at war with each other. So you have one slate of precinct electors. I mean, this is the first time anyone's ever care about a precinct election for a party, because usually it's pretty benign.
I would consider it a low intensity conflict. I know what real war looks like, and honestly, it's a low intent. Just like water right now is a low intensity conflict. Thank God I hadn't gotten to like where we're actually killing each other over that and high intensity conflict. But that's what the Marine Corps predicted will happen, especially in the equator region by 2050. Water is going to be just as important as oil, and we need to think about that. But as far as our county and the party like that, I mean, see, Paul Zolan is a Marine officer, and so am I. Right. So we have a real special bond with that goes well beyond any politics and things like that. Yeah. And I know I can call him and he can call me, and we can talk over things. But, you know, that's the great part about being in a democracy. You get to vote every once in a while on who you want. Right. And then if you want someone different, folks, then show up on early voting, 20 February through 1 March, or Election Day on 5 March, and vote who you think is the right person. And I don't consider that a low-intensity conflict. I call that the beauty, the hard part of being a democracy. Right. That's okay.
Right. Democracy is, the military plays an interesting role. I mean, we've had a lot of, you know, people who have served who have been, you know, my favorite presidents, by the way, are Republicans.
Reagan?
No, I don't. Reagan doesn't really do much for me, but, I mean, Grant is like my favorite. People don't realize how important of a president he really was. They always say, oh, he was scandal scarred, but no, he was...
Talk about a tough role rebuilding America. And I have a family history throughout all of that as well.
Yeah, and as do I. I mean, I've got my grandmother's family had 6 generations of military service, and we got one side of the family goes all the way back to the Revolutionary War, and
so does mine.
I feel fortunate that I never served from the standpoint that I was protected to do other things by people who chose to serve, and some of my best friends, probably similar in age range. A lot of my friends went into the military. Like, I thank them every day. I thank my kid every day. For being in. I'm a proud military dad.
Yeah, you are.
So that's good stuff.
Yeah, being an LCAC driver or pilot's pretty neat.
He's an electrician, so he's in the guts of the thing all the time. So it's an interesting time in the military too. He's a good example of that. I mean, he's so busy that
Has he deployed yet with the LCAC group?
No, he had. He was in Japan. It is an interesting story. He was in Japan with the LCACs there in southern Japan, on the big base that's there. And right before they went,
Yokosuka? Yokosuka Naval Base?
I think so, yeah. Southern Japan. Yeah, I think you're right. I'm trying to remember the name of it off the top of my head. But I'm getting to be older and I'm forgetting things. But he was there for about 2.5 months, and they were getting ready to move. And then my grandson had a seizure. And so the Navy was like, we can't move him because there's no pediatric neurologist there.
Interesting.
Yeah, so he was there for 6 months, and then he had to get new orders and come back to Pendleton.
Yeah.
So because he was on a destroyer for the first 4 or 5 years of his service. So,
okay. Yeah. Accomplished electrician then.
Oh yeah. So he's E6, I think now.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, he so they came back to Pendleton because the one that thought the medical base is right there. So my grandson's had 2 other seizures since then. And
did you see our hospital at Camp Pendleton?
Yeah. I mean,
beautiful.
They're right down the street from it, basically. They're up in that Lincoln housing. Yeah. So, it was an interesting time so we're grateful that he was there. We're like, okay, either he's going to go to Hawaii or he's going to go to Pendleton. And I was like, told my wife, I said, he'll be at Pendleton. And now they're there for 4 years, I think.
Yeah.
So
we'll have a good life and have a great credentials when he gets out to be a high voltage electrician to maybe solve some of these issues we have.
I just kept telling him, I said, I think you should stay in. I think you should do 20.
Yeah.
Because of the retirement and the benefits and the medical care that they get for their son. I go, but the temptation to go make 6 figures, is there. And that's one of the reasons why I think they're having trouble, filling some of these roles. Retention.
I know.
So it's really tough.
But yeah, please tell him, do 20, get out. The power's still going to grow. It's still going to be there. And he'll have a great opportunity. He can move back to Texas and help us out.
Yeah. He'd love it here. So, although he loves Arizona, so I don't know where he's going to go. But, all right, pop culture question for you.
Oh, boy.
Greatest Marine movie. Greatest movie involving Marines. We got some big ones.
Sands of Iwo Jima.
Sands of Iwo Jima. I knew you were going to say that.
Kind of a big fan of.
Yeah. The mine is the Pacific.
Oh yeah, the series.
Yeah. And just like the heartbreak when Barcelona is killed. I mean, oh my God, he's been through so much, and then he gets killed.
Are you watching this current series?
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
The
Masters of the Air.
Yeah, Masters of the Air.
Yeah.
I'm so ready. It's Friday, right? The new one's coming out. I think today.
I'm gonna tell you, I watched it. I watched it last night because it comes out. You actually get it at 8, and I watched it last night, and I was just so. The second episode when they go to the mission to Regensburg, when they fly across and then they come south.
To
that
Africa.
Was insane. It's not like the gory parts like Saving Private Ryan, but it's just the idea that you're trapped in these planes.
Like that kid in the turret and the decision his friend had to make.
Yeah.
That was the great part of this series. It's very real.
It's very real.
I can tell you, that's what it feels like. Yeah. To have terrible decisions.
Right.
I lost a guy from drowning who was trying to help his friend, who was an Afghan policeman. This was my best sergeant.
Yeah.
And he went down in the Helmand River trying to save an Afghan policeman that was part of his squad.
Wow.
Just like the movie, right? And all his friends had to watch it as they get swept away.
Yeah.
Sergeant Reitzman, Joe Reitzman. And that's how we remember our people, is in stories like that. So when I watched that movie and I thought about how hard it was for his friend to say goodbye to him, and then the plane blew up, and the feelings, the emotion, and the guilt that you go with, what do you think all the rest of the squad felt like watching their squad leader drown in front of them? It was absolutely terrible.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, but he was a great hero, and his number one fear in life was drowning and swimming as a squad leader.
Yeah.
But he had no fear and overcome that. That's what our servicemen do, especially our Marines, and overcome their fear and do their job every day. So I leave on that note.
This show, the Master of the Air speaks really powerfully to my wife, because her father was a radio operator on B-25s and in Southern Europe, in Italy, and he flew 50 missions in 6 months.
Not like 25.
No, because by the
50?
time, because I think they changed it like 44.
Yeah, we had to stick around longer.
You had to stick around longer because they were losing so many crews, and so you had to stick. And he flew every day, and there's been a couple of scenes where the radio operators, because of where they're positioned in the plane, they get hit.
Low on the belly.
This last one, though, this next episode, the one you're gonna watch today, I mean, it's gut wrenching. I was sitting there and I was like, my hands were sweaty, and I'm like, I have no frame of reference, no concept of what those guys would go through. Just watching it on TV, I was just like, oh my gosh.
Feels real, right?
Feels real.
Yeah.
It feels real. It feels like,
Tom Hanks, Spielberg, they're just incredible.
Well, they've done such a great job of putting that together. So anyway, that's another conversation for another day.
Okay.
So all right,
I enjoyed it.
Movies about Marines that need to be made, though, I'm telling you right now. I know Ridley Scott was going to do a movie on Tripoli.
I have one.
You have one? What
absolutely.
What would you do?
Battle of Shawan.
Is that?
It's the most incredible story that hasn't been told. They've proposed it to some studios. A friend of mine, Byron Owen, was the platoon commander in that. He's still the most extraordinary platoon commander I've ever met, and he's a great lieutenant colonel. Might be a colonel by now, but the Battle of Shawan was one platoon of Force Reconnaissance Marines against 250 insurgents.
Yeah,
so we're talking
25
on 250.
Wow.
Guess who won?
Yeah.
They slugged it out. They used air. They used the machine guns. They used everything. They came out victorious. And then after that, no one wanted to mess with the Humvees with the diamond on it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Don't mess with those guys.
I could go on and on for it, but that's the movie that needs to be told. The Battle of Shawan, which is in western Afghanistan. Byron Owen.
Here's a true story for you. So I grew up in Southern California, and 29 Palms was in our league.
Oh no, not that place.
Yeah. So I grew up in Banning, and Banning's right on the 10.
Yep.
And so 1990, I guess it was 91, I got a chance to interview Bob Hope.
Oh, wow.
And I told him, I said, well, and I was like, last person to interview him, I was like a college student, and I said, hey, it was just, everyone's asking all the questions. I'm from Banning. What do you think about Banning?
He got some floods.
And he's like, hey. And his manager was trying to like move him on. She said, no, I got to tell him this guy the story. I need to hear the story. He talked about going to, during, this is right after the first Gulf War, and he told the story. He's like, yeah, I'm like in Saudi Arabia, and there's like all these Marines, and I asked him where they were from, and he's like, they were like, we're 29 Palms.
Yeah.
And he's like, whoa, wait a minute here. You mean I flew all the way over here to see the same haircuts I see on Palm Canyon Drive.
Absolutely.
Every Saturday night.
It's where I met my wife in
Palm Springs. Oh,
yeah,
nice.
Stacy, I love you.
It was just so funny that that's he brought that story up, and his question, to me was, just telling that story, and he told the Marines at the time, he goes, well, you didn't tell me, the guys from the next hill over from Banning. I mean, why did I come out here for all this to see all you guys?
Because we're warriors, and you would not believe what we produce out of 29 Palms.
Oh my gosh,
unbelievable!
Yeah, you have to survive a summer out there.
Yeah, boy, I have stories about some folks that just miscalculated on that one, and that hurt them. But for my group, that was my first duty station, and my favorite unit was from that group.
Really? Okay.
7th Marine Toes. My regimental commander was a guy named James Mattis.
Okay. Yeah, that guy, right? Yeah.
And I was his lieutenant, running around with a great group of guys, and we're all gonna gather here in San Antonio in May.
Does every Marine have to be? Do they all get to go to Lejeune, and Pendleton and 29 Palms? Are those are the three biggies in your rotation of service?
Yeah, they really are. East Coast or West Coast, and those are our big three major bases. So we bounce back and forth. And I did my time at Lejeune or Lejeune, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
I did my Pendleton and my 29 Palms. I did my Hawaii time. So
Yeah.
I mean, staying long enough, you're going to swing from East to West Coast. Some guys try to stay on one coast and then buy a home instead of living on base and build up some equity, which is a great idea. We had a chance to do that.
Good luck at Pendleton doing that. Holy smokes.
No, I have friends that have done it.
Yeah.
And they're sitting on
millions.
$1 million homes, that
are
crazy that they bought, at a decent rate. But, both him and his wife had to work in order to afford it back then. And a lot of people are having to do that here in Kerr County too, right?
Right.
Cost of living.
All right, good stuff.
All right.
We spent some time. Good job.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for doing it. And early voting starts next week on the 20th. And we will get with hopefully Tammy on Monday if she's able to. If not, I'll make her call me. We won't have to have her come in. Well, I'll have her.
Yeah.
I'll have her come in and talk to us. So have a great rest of your week and your Friday. Thanks a lot for being here. We will see you guys again on Monday. Have a great day.
All right.
Stones, no broken promises, no busy tones. Just what it takes, just make